The first time they told me I wasn't invited, I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I just nodded, like someone being quietly erased from a photograph. My name is Margaret Holloway, 72 years old. I used to be called Mom, Grandma, the woman who held the family together. The one who never forgot birthdays, who cooked until my hands ached, who loaned money I never saw again, and then one winter morning, over tea and dry pine cones set neatly on the table, my daughter-in-law looked straight at me and said, "We've decided Christmas will be different this year. Just us and the kids. You don't need to come." Her voice was calm. Matter of fact. Like she was trimming off a loose thread, I poured the tea. Didn't ask what they wanted. Didn't argue. Didn't plead because I understood something in that moment, something colder than the frost on the window. I had stopped being a mother in their eyes. I had become a background. A fixture. A piece of furniture they no longer noticed. No one at the table rushed to speak for me. No one said, but it wouldn't be Christmas without her. Silence did all the talking, and I realized this was not the first time I had been erased. It was only the first time they said it out loud. The fire popped in the old hearth. My granddaughter's small hands fiddled with a paper snowflake she'd made. She didn't look at me. No one did. So I reached for my cup, let the warmth settle in my hands, and thought, if they don't see me anymore, maybe it's time I see myself. What none of them knew was that morning was not the end of my story. It was the beginning, because that winter, I would stop nodding. That winter, I would stop waiting for permission. That winter, I would show them what happens when a mother stops being silent. The cabin was still that morning. No lights strung across the walls, just a few paper bows and dry pine cones from the yard. The fire crackled, spitting quiet sparks, the only sound filling the empty room. I set the kettle down, poured the tea, and didn't ask what they wanted. They arrived later than usual. Travis, my son, carrying himself heavy, as though the weight of his silence from all those years had finally caught up. His wife, Harry, precise as ever, shoulders pulled back, lips pressed tight. And Becca, my granddaughter, holding something in her hands she clutched like a secret. It was Harry who spoke first. "Mom, I know it was sudden. I mean, you leaving." I didn't answer. Just set the teacup in front of her, careful, deliberate. She continued, "I thought maybe you just needed space. But Becca really missed you." I turned to Becca. The child said nothing, but placed her handmade wreath on the table, a circle of bent wire, scraps of fabric, 2 uneven paper snowflakes taped carefully and placed. I reached out, brushed my fingers across it, then nodded once. Travis lowered himself into the wooden chair near the fire. It struck me, it had been years since I'd seen him sit lower than me. He looked at me, eyes softer than I remembered, quietly. "You leaving made me feel lost." I sat across from him, my hand curled around the warmth of my own tea. The fire popped. No one else spoke. I didn't smile. I didn't cry. Instead, I said, "When I was there, no one said anything. Now I'm gone, and that's the problem." No one argued. No one defended themselves. Harry cleared her throat, shifted forward. "We brought gingerbread. Becca picked the flavor you like." I nodded but didn't open the box. Didn't thank her either. Because I've lived long enough to know, not everything left on your doorstep is love. The string lights draped over the bookshelf glowed faintly, pretending to make the room warm. But nothing could soften the space between me and them. I stood, picked up Becca's wreath, and hung it on the bedroom door. Same nail I'd kept for past Christmases. Becca's lips pressed tight, the way her mother's do when she's holding back tears. When I sat back down, Travis looked toward the frost gathering on the window. "Mom," he asked, "are you coming back?" I shook my head, his voice cracked lower, almost a whisper. "I understand. It's all so empty." I looked at him, this boy who once clung to me when ice slid off the roof at night. Now a man with a house, a wife, 2 children, and still no idea how much space a mother truly needs. I didn't blame him. I didn't forgive him either. I simply said, soft as wind brushing through pine needles, "I'm not angry. I just don't live by instructions anymore." Silence settled thick as snow. Harry's throat tightened as if words rose but froze before they could escape. Becca sat with her small hands locked in her lap, eyes fixed on the fire, and I realized something in that silence. This wasn't reconciliation. This was recognition. When they finally stood, I didn't walk them to the door. I stayed where I was, hand resting on the edge of the table. I listened to the crunch of snow under their boots, the heavy car door closing, but before the SUV pulled away, I caught a glimpse through the frost. Becca turned her head and smiled, a fragile smile, but one I knew. It was the same smile I wore when I was her age. I didn't know if that smile was meant for me. But either way, I understood. That visit closed one door and opened another. The morning after their visit, the cabin still smelled of smoke and cinnamon. The wreath Becca had made sat on the table, dry now, but not broken. I lifted it gently and hung it on the window, not for anyone else to see, but for me. So that every time I looked outside, I would remember, even fragile things can hold. I wrapped a scarf around my neck, the one Becca had given me years ago, hand-knit, still faintly carrying the scent of baby shampoo. Then I tucked a basket of cookies under my arm, along with a worn book whose corners folded like tired wings. Snowflakes fell like quiet punctuation as I crossed the stone path to town. Paige and Pine sat at the corner where everything seemed to move slower, especially in winter. Its windows glowed warm against the pale. The bell above the door chimed softly when I stepped inside. "Margaret," Evelyn called from behind the counter, her voice carrying the kind of welcome that makes you feel expected. She waved like I was someone she'd been waiting for. No one here knew about the silence of my dinners, the empty seats that once belonged to family. Here, I was simply the woman with cookies and a story in her hands. The reading nook waited near the window, fogged glass letting in a muted light. Children sat on a rug in a half-circle, barriered headbands tilted, tiny hands clutching cups of cocoa that steamed into the air. I lowered myself carefully, placed the basket on the side table, and opened the book. The story I told had no princess, no dragon. Just an old woman living alone in a wooden cabin. Once, she had a family. But over time, one by one, they forgot how to knock. The children listened with wide eyes, their silence not heavy but whole. They didn't interrupt. They didn't ask why. They didn't need to know the woman's real name. They just needed to know she was still there, feeding the fire, talking to the wind, telling her stories to the trees. My voice was steady, quiet. Not dramatic, not theatrical, like I was reading to myself. When the last page closed, I handed out the cookies. No one asked who I lived with. No one asked how many grandchildren I had. They only asked, "Will you tell another one?" And I nodded. Because for the first time in a long time, I felt like I still had something worth giving. When the children left, Evelyn came to me with a small smile. She set a business card gently on the table. "We're looking for someone to tell stories more often. If you'd like, I'll even print a little sign. Storyteller in residence, Margaret Holloway." I laughed quietly, not at the title, but at the name. My name. Not Mom, not Grandma, not Mrs. Holloway. Just Margaret. For the first time in years, I saw myself written without roles attached to me. And it felt like stepping into a room where I wasn't invisible. That night, the cabin was quiet except for the ticking of the old clock above the mantel. I sat in my armchair, a mug of tea cooling in my hands, the wreath Becca made silhouetted against the frosted glass. For years, this house had been a gathering place. I could still see it if I closed my eyes. Daniel carving the turkey at Christmas. Plates stacked high with mashed potatoes. Harry laughing with his mouth full. Becca curled up by the tree, her hair a tangle of ribbons and light, and me, always moving. Always making sure no one's cup was empty, no one's plate bare, no one left without something wrapped in foil to take home. I had been the invisible hand behind every celebration. The glue no one saw but everyone relied on, and now, I was told, I wasn't needed at all. The memory of Harry's voice echoed like a splinter in the dark. "Mom, we've decided not to invite you this year." Not can't. Not sorry. Not we wish you could come. Decided. As if my presence had been a choice they'd weighed and voted against. I thought about the bank account Daniel and I had built over decades, every extra dollar folded into their education, their weddings, the down payments for their houses. My husband and I had lived modestly so they could live comfortably. I remembered the nights I went without new shoes, without warm coats, because the children needed braces, or camp fees, or music lessons. I remembered driving hours in the snow just to babysit, never asking for a dime, and still, I had been dismissed like a guest who'd overstayed her welcome. The weight of it pressed on me. The quiet cruelty of being erased by those you raised. I put the cold mug down and let the silence deepen. It wasn't the loss of Christmas that hurt. It was the loss of recognition. The loss of being seen as someone who had given, who had mattered. I pressed my hand to my chest and whispered into the empty room. I was more than a wallet. More than a cook. More than a chair filler at your table. The fire snapped, as if answering, and in that flicker of light, something in me shifted. For the first time, I didn't feel like a mother left behind. I felt like a woman who had been freed, because if they no longer needed me, then I was no longer bound to them, and that meant I could begin again. The next morning, I woke with a strange clarity. The snow outside had covered everything in white silence, as if the world itself was giving me permission to start fresh. I went to my desk, the old oak one Daniel and I had bought the year we married, and opened the drawer where I kept every file, every paper, every receipt. For years, I had been the silent benefactor of my children's lives. The down payment on Harry's house? My savings. The car Travis drove? Daniel's life insurance. The little emergency loans that never got paid back? Me again. I had never called them debts. I had called them love, but now, I realized, love had been rebranded as obligation. And I was tired of owing anyone anything. So I began writing. First, to the bank, withdrawing the joint signatures that allowed Harry to dip into my account in case of emergencies. Then to the lawyer, transferring the deed of this cabin into a trust that bore one name only, mine. No inheritance guarantees. No automatic windfalls. Then to my pension board, cutting off the family benefits that had been silently funneling to their households under my name. Each letter I sealed felt like reclaiming a piece of myself. It wasn't anger that guided me. It was precision. I was building something they could not see, could not touch, could not take from me. By noon, I sat back, the stack of envelopes ready for the post. For the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about what they needed from me. I was thinking about what I needed, and what I needed was simple, a life that no longer left me waiting for invitations that would never come. That evening, Ellie from the cafe stopped by, cheeks red from the cold, holding a bag of leftover bread. They were going to throw it out. I thought you might like it, she said. I looked at her, this girl who remembered me when my own children had chosen to forget, and I felt something unlock. Come in, I said. The kettle's on. She smiled and stepped inside, filling the room with a warmth I hadn't felt in years. As she spoke about her college applications, her plans, her fears, I realized, my story wasn't ending. It was only shifting, and soon, my children would understand the truth. I was not a wallet, I was not a ghost at their table. I was a woman who had finally remembered her worth. And when the snow melted, they would discover just how much they had lost. It didn't take long for the first call to come. 3 weeks after Christmas. As the snow thawed into gray slush along the roads of Briarwood Hollow, my phone rang. Harry's name glowed on the screen. For a moment, I considered letting it ring out. But curiosity won, Mom? His voice carried that tight edge, the one I'd heard before whenever bills piled up higher than his patience. There's some kind of mistake with the bank. The automatic transfer for Becca's tuition didn't go through. I thought maybe you forgot? Forgot? I almost laughed. As if for decades, my whole identity hadn't been remembering birthdays, school fees, doctor visits, mortgage deadlines. No mistake, I said simply. I ended the transfer. Silence. Then, you what? I said I ended it. His breath hitched like someone had pulled the rug out from under him. Mom, you can't just, Becca needs, how do you expect? I cut him off. Calm, steady, I expect you to manage. She's your daughter, Harry. Not mine to pay for anymore. The line went quiet for a beat, then filled with his anger. You can't do this. After everything we've planned around, I already did. And I ended the call. The next week, it was Travis. He showed up at my door unannounced, stamping snow off his boots, his hair a mess of panic. Mom, the car. The insurance lapsed. They said the policy got pulled from your account. What's going on? I stood in the doorway, arms folded, blocking his way inside. What's going on is that you're 38 years old, Travis. Old enough to pay for your own wheels. His eyes darted past me, into the house, searching for the mother who used to drop everything at the sound of trouble. She told you to do this, didn't she? Haley? She poisoned you against us. I shook my head slowly. No one poisoned me. I woke up. Word must have spread fast among them, because by February, the calls weren't even polite anymore. Messages piled on my machine. How could you cut us out? We're family. Families help each other. Do you want us to drown, is that it? Each one was another stone thrown against a window I no longer opened, and still, when I set the phone back down and looked around my quiet little cabin, I didn't feel guilt. I felt air in my lungs for the first time in years. They were unraveling not because I'd abandoned them but because they had abandoned themselves the moment they made me into nothing but a safety net. Now the net was gone. And they were falling, and I was just beginning to rise. It was late March when the knock came, not a gentle tap. A pounding. I knew before I even opened the door who it would be. Harry stood there, his cheeks flushed, his coat unbuttoned, like he'd run from the car in a rage. Travis was behind him, jaw set tight, fists stuffed into his pockets. They didn't ask permission. They stepped right inside, filling the little cabin with their storm. You can't just cut us off like this, Harry snapped, tossing his gloves onto my table. Do you know what this is doing to Becca? To us? I stayed seated, my tea still warm between my palms. Sit down, I said calmly. Neither did. They loomed over me, taller, angrier, like two boys who'd forgotten their mother wasn't afraid of shadows anymore. You always said family sticks together, Travis pushed. And now what? You just pull the rug out and walk away? I looked at them. Really looked. Two men with mortgages, jobs, wives, children, yet still speaking like the world owed them something, like I owed them something. You're not listening, I said, my voice low but firm. I didn't walk away. I stopped carrying what was never mine to hold. Harry scoffed, running a hand through his hair. That's rich. After everything we'd been through, after Dad left, you were all we had. And now you decide you're done? Like we're disposable? I set the teacup down, the porcelain clicking against wood. No. I was disposable. I was the one who gave until there was nothing left, and you didn't notice until the giving stopped. Their mouths opened, but I didn't let them speak. Do you remember how much I gave Travis when he lost his job? 2 years of rent, groceries, even the car payment. And you, Harry, how many times did I bail you out of debts? Pay tuition? Fix the messes you left? Tell me, did either of you once stop and ask me what I needed? Silence. Did you ever think of me as more than a wallet with a pulse? The words hung in the air like frost. Travis's lips pressed tight, his anger thinning into something else, shame, maybe. Harry's face flushed darker. He shook his head. You're twisting this. We're family. That's what families do, help each other. No, I corrected him softly. That's what I did. Alone. Year after year. And you mistook it for normal. The fire crackled behind me. Outside, snow slid off the roof in heavy sheets. You're grown men, I said. With lives, with children, with homes of your own. And yet you're standing here blaming me because you never learned how to stand on your own 2 feet. That ends today. For the first time, they didn't have an answer. Travis's fists loosened. He shifted his weight like a child caught stealing. Harry stared at me, searching for the mother who used to fold under guilt. But she wasn't here anymore.
Finally, Harry muttered, so what? That's it? You just cut us out. I leaned back, folding my hands together. No. I cut the strings. If you want to walk beside me as my sons, you're welcome. But if all you see is the wallet, then yes, this is it. The silence that followed was heavier than any argument. They didn't shout. They didn't slam the door, they just left, and for once, I didn't follow them after they left. The cabin felt quieter than ever. The fire still burned, the clock still ticked, but the air no longer carried the weight of their shadows. For the first time, silence didn't ache. It soothed. That night, I sat at my table with nothing but a notebook and a pen. I wrote one sentence: I don't need to be useful to be worthy. It startled me to see it written down, like a stranger's words wearing my handwriting. But I left it there, uncrossed, unchallenged. The next morning, I took a basket of cookies down to Page and Pine, the little bookstore that smelled of cinnamon and new paper. Evelyn waved as soon as I stepped in. Mary Beth. You came back. I smiled, not the polite, practiced smile I'd used for decades, but a genuine, small one that felt like it belonged only to me. The children were already gathered in the reading nook, their cocoa steaming, cheeks flushed from the cold. Story time. One of them cheered. I sat by the fogged window, opened my old book, and read. This time, I wasn't performing for approval. I wasn't trying to prove my place. I was simply there, sharing what still lived inside me, and when the story ended, their little voices begged, another one, please. I nodded. Not out of duty, but because I wanted to. By spring, Evelyn pinned a small card by the counter: storyteller in residence, Mary Beth Ellison. I laughed when I saw it, not out of mockery, but out of wonder. For the first time, my name stood alone. Not Mom. Not Grandma. Not Mrs. Ellison, just me. The days unfolded gently. I planted tulips outside the cabin, red and yellow, the colors I once never had time to notice. Baked bread not because anyone asked, but because I loved the smell. Wrote in my notebook each evening, small things, big truths. Travis and Harry called less often. Sometimes not at all. But instead of aching, I felt lighter. Their silence no longer defined me. One Sunday, Becca showed up alone. She stood on the porch, holding a drawing, a little house under falling snow, with a window lit warmly. This is you, Grandma, she said softly. I looked at her, at the child who hadn't learned yet how to use people up. I opened the door wider. Come in, I whispered. We sat by the fire, and she asked me for a story, not about castles or dragons, but about me. So, I told her about a girl who once thought she had to give everything away to be loved. And how one winter, she discovered she was still enough, even if no one asked her for anything. Becca listened with wide eyes, nodding as though she understood more than I expected. That night, after she left, I hung her drawing beside the wreath she'd given me. 2 small gifts, fragile, imperfect, but mine to keep, and for the first time in years, I didn't measure myself by what I had lost, I measured myself by what I had begun. Summer arrived slow in Briarwood Hollow. The ice melted from the stone path, the tulips bloomed, and the cabin no longer felt like exile. It felt like home. I wasn't waiting for the phone to ring anymore. If it did, I answered. If it didn't, I lit the fire anyway. In July, Travis stopped by. He stood awkwardly at the door, hands shoved into his pockets. Hi, Mom, he said. I looked at him, at the lines in his face, the way his shoulders sagged as if life had finally asked him to carry his own weight. I'm not here to ask for anything, he added quickly. I just wanted to say thank you for everything you did back then. And I'm sorry I never said it before. His words weren't perfect. They weren't wrapped in ribbons. But they were his. Nodded, and for the first time, I let the silence between us feel like forgiveness, not because he earned it, but because I didn't want to carry bitterness anymore. Harry never came. Maybe one day he will, maybe not. But I no longer measure my worth by his presence. The bookstore became my sanctuary. Children crowded around, waiting for stories. Evelyn teased that I had a following now. You're famous, Mary Beth. But I wasn't chasing fame. I was reclaiming something simpler, the joy of giving on my own terms. Becca visited often. She would sit by the fire, draw pictures, and ask me about the girl in the woods who learned to light her own fire. She never called her Grandma. She called her hero, and though I never said it out loud, I knew she saw me for who I was, not just what I had given. One evening in early autumn, I walked the path behind the cabin. The air cool and gold with fading sun, thought about all the roles I had carried, wife, mother, grandmother, caretaker, provider, and how easily they had slipped away when others no longer needed them, but I was still here. Still Mary Beth, and that was enough. I returned inside, opened my notebook, and wrote my final line for the season: dignity is the fire no one can take from you. Once lit, it burns quietly, forever. I closed the book, placed it by the window where the wreath and Becca's drawing hung side by side. The world outside was already cooling into another winter, but inside, the fire glowed warm, and for the first time in my life, I knew this. I wasn't a background character anymore. I was my own story, just Mary Beth, nothing more. Nothing less.